remains open for as long as possible. Okay, and then we usually use prostaglandin E intravenously to keep this duct then open up until we can fix this this coarctation. Okay, as soon as we fix this coarctation, we can close the PDA as well, and then the patient will be completely fine. Okay, so that is the coarctation of the aorta. And the last one that we are looking at is the tetralogy of Fallot. Now, the tetralogy of Fallot is a cyanotic defect, but the tetralogy of Fallot is a congenital defect in which there is 4 different types of abnormalities in this patient. Okay, so first of all, there is a VSD. Okay, so you can see that there is a VSD here, so there's an opening between the right and the left ventricle. You can see that there is pulmonary artery stenosis, so it means that your pulmonary valve is stenotic. That pulmonary valve is stenotic. That will cause hypertrophy of your right ventricle, okay, because this now needs to pump harder against the stenotic valve. And then you also have the shifting of the position of the aorta. Okay, so the aorta, you can see that it opens into the right ventricle and not into the left ventricle. So we refer to this as an overriding aorta. So both the aorta and a pulmonary artery and aorta is then situated from the right ventricle, or flows out of the right ventricle. Okay, so this is obviously, as you can think for yourself, from all the congenital heart defects, this is the most dangerous one. It's the surgically most difficult one to repair, but the surgeons do repair these children with good results, but these children are very, very sick, and we refer to this type of congenital heart defect as to a cyanotic defect. Okay. Now, if we look at the clinical manifestations of these congenital heart defects, obviously it depends on what type of defect you are dealing with. So first of all, if we look at the right to left chance, cyanosis, fatigue and weakness can occur. Remember I told you, with the right to left chant, the amount of blood that enters the systemic circulation can be compromised, and that's why we feel fatigued. Okay, usually if we crouch or bend over, it can relieve some of the symptoms, and clubbing of the digits may develop. That's when you look at your fingernails, they will become round and elevated. That's what we refer to as clubbing. Okay, with the right to left chant, you can have pulmonary congestion and dyspnea, and left heart failure can also occur. Now, why is that? Because remember I told you, with the left to right shunt, the blood from the left hand side of the heart is being shunted through the hole and being delivered to the right heart of your patient. Now that means that the right heart can only take that amount of blood, so there can be pushing of blood back into the lungs, which will then end up in this pulmonary congestion or dyspnea. Okay, if there is not adequate amount of blood in the left side to be expelled, your patient can also go into left heart failure. Now, if we look at the diagnostic tools, okay, with an ASD, splitting of the second heart sound is frequently heard because of the closure of the pulmonary valve, which may be prolonged. With the VSD, a systolic murmur may be present. With the postductal coarctation, that means the PDA is situated after the coarctation. Usually there will be disparities, there will be differences in lower and upper body blood pressures due to the fact that if you have this, preference will be lent to the delivery of blood to your upper body systems rather than your lower body systems. And that's where the disparity in your blood pressure comes from. With Doppler echo or echocardiography, we can show all the cardiovascular structures and the blood flow direction and velocity. And then an MDCT has a very fast scan time, excellent resolution, and is more cost effective than an MRI. Now, an MDCT scan stands for a very fast type of CT scan. That's in actual fact what it means. It means that this is a constellation of computer technology used with X-rays. They also refer to it as computer tomography. Okay, so this is just much more cost effective than doing an MRI on the patient. Okay, good. Okay, so that completes congenital heart defects. Okay, so what is important there, I might be able to give you a picture, okay, and ask you, okay, from this picture, identify the congenital heart defect and explain the pathophysiology of the disease. Okay, so or I can ask you name different types, or I can tell you, say for instance, this is the symptoms, identify the heart defect. Okay, so yeah, that's how I will ask you. Okay, so the last one that we need to look at is shock. Now all of you are familiar with shock. Okay, now what is shock? Shock means that there's a dramatic decrease in your blood pressure. Okay, so that's when your systemic arterial blood pressure plummets to the ground, and that can be due to various things that happens to you, and that is usually, and the end result of shock is usually that all the organs and systems start to shut down, because now there's no blood pressure that can sustain oxygen delivery and blood delivery to your systemic organs, and therefore your whole periphery will start to shut down, and that makes shock so dangerous. Okay, so if we go, but now the body also has a defense mechanism, as I explained to you previously. So if we go into a state of shock, it's very important to remember that the body is going to compensate. Okay, so we have now a dramatic fall in blood pressure. Now how are we going to compensate for this condition? First of all, I told you that the arms and the legs are not regarded as vital organs. Therefore, the blood that's in your arms and legs will be shunted away from them to the heart in order to keep the heart alive. Okay, that's one thing. So we will divert blood. The other thing is where we can get volume from, is we can stop urine output completely in order for us to reabsorb all the urine to retain volume. So that's all the compensatory mechanisms that we can apply in order to reverse or to prolong our ability to live with our shock state. Okay, so usually during this compensation process, several organs gets compromised, which is usually your kidneys, your gut. We will also shunt all the fluid content from the gut, the mesentery, to the heart, and then also skin. The skin will be compromised. Okay, so usually we get sloughing of the skin will start to peel off due to the fact that they have been oxygen deprived. Gastric ulcers can develop due to the fact that the mesentery or the intestines has been deprived of oxygen. And then we can also go into renal failure due to the fact that we have shut down the kidneys. Okay, we've stopped them from doing their daily job in excreting urine because we want to retain the urine. Okay, so if we look at the photoreceptor response to shock, I think that's pretty much what I've covered just now. Obviously, if you go into a state of shock, the photoreceptor reflexes will be activated immediately, and they will try and compensate for the reduced blood flow. Okay, so what I'm going to do? The only thing basically that I have control over is my total peripheral resistance. Okay, because there's no, and then also the little bit of volume that I can gain from other sources in the body. Okay, so immediately I will shut down my periphery by increasing my total peripheral resistance. So the body will increase its PR, okay? And then obviously when you know that you increase blood pressure by increasing the heart rate or the stroke volume, and stroke volume can then be increased by reducing your renal output and shunting away from the periphery. Okay. If shock worsens, it will become irreversible, and obviously irreversible shock will end up in death. Good. Now, it is very important, or we get different types of shock that can occur to you. So, for instance, any of these can cause a dramatic decrease in blood pressure. Okay. Now, if you know what's the causative thing that causes this severe drop in blood pressure, you're fine. Okay, so anything, as you see, cardiac output obviously is influenced by heart rate and stroke volume and your total peripheral resistance. Okay, now you must just remember the processes that I've taught you in class. If you have cardiogenic shock, okay, so that means you can have a myocardial infarction, you can have heart failure, then you can go into cardiogenic shock. If the heart loses the ability to pump, you can do anything that you want to do, but you won't be able to have any expelling of blood into the left ventricle, or from the left ventricle into the aorta. Therefore, if there's no blood coming from the left ventricle, or limited amount of blood coming from the left ventricle into the aorta, your blood pressure is going to be null and void. Okay, it's going to be very, very low. Hypovolemic shock. Okay, remember I told you that output is influenced by volume, stroke volume. So if there's no volume going around, there is no volume inside the inside of your hose pipe, and if there's no water on the inside of your hose pipe, the pressure in that hose pipe will be extremely low. So a very good example of hypovolemic shock is dehydration. Okay, so a patient suffering from that will cause will suffer from hypovolemic shock. Okay. Then anaphylactic shock. Anaphylactic shock is usually when you have an allergic reaction. That is then where you have a stimulus that initiates this impeccable inflammatory response. You know what happens with an inflammatory response. Your arteries starts to open up, they increase their permeability, and then fluid gets lost into the interstitial spaces, and that is the cause of anaphylactic shock. Septic shock works on exactly the same principle. Here the causative agent is just an organism, a bacteria, a virus, or fungi. Neurogenic shock is when the vagus nerve gets damaged, usually of the one controlling the cardiovascular center, and then it influences your cardiac output. Okay, that can lead to neurogenic shock. And the last one, burn shock, is when a huge amount of your body's surface area has been burned. The problem with any type of burn is that it initiates a severe inflammatory response, then which increases then the permeability of your arteries, and then this fluid starts to leak into the interstitial spaces. That's why usually if patients have severe burn wounds, they lose a lot of their fluid through their skin. You will see we usually put them on bed liners, etc., because they are expelling fluid continuously through this burn wounds. Okay, they basically lie in a dam of water. Okay, and that loss of fluid then ultimately leads to a combination of burn shock and hypovolemic shock. Okay, now this is the different types of shock that we get. Okay, so the clinical manifestations is then quite easy. If you know you don't have any type of blood pressure, then you can see that the skin, remember I'm going to shunt from the periphery and I'm going to send the blood to my heart in order to keep me alive. So my skin will be cool and clammy. It will be paler, okay, it's going to be pale. I'm going to increase my heart rate and respiratory rate because I'm oxygen deprived. I'm going to have a dramatically decreased blood pressure, that's why I am having the shock. And individuals with neurogenic shock will have a normal or slow heart rate and will be warm and dry on the touch. Okay. The diagnostic tools, again, you're going to measure the patient's blood pressure and you will see the blood pressure is going to fall dramatically. And then the urine output is going to decrease dramatically. Okay, if we don't do anything about shock, remember what we said, that shock is irreversible, and as soon as it becomes irreversible, it will end up in death. Okay, so if we look at tissue hypoxia, cell death and multi-organ failure can occur after prolonged periods of decreased blood pressure. ARDS, which is adult respiratory distress syndrome, it's usually a disease. I will explain to you this in detail when we do the respiratory system. That's when you have the destruction of your alveolar capillary networks. And then most of the patients that dies from shock, where the shock becomes irreversible, will develop DIC, which is disseminated intravascular coagulation, which causes, due to the severe and prolonged periods of hypertension, hypotension that this patient is suffering from, they start to clot spontaneously. Okay, so they form little blood clots all over, and that is then referred to as DIC. Okay, so that is the massive stimulation of your coagulation cascade. Okay, so massive clotting is induced in these patients, and ultimately these patients will bleed themselves to death because due to this massive clotting that occur, all the platelets is being used up until the point that the patient will just spontaneously start to bleed from every orifice because there's no more clotting factors in his body. Okay. And that completes shock. Okay, so this is then the congenital heart defects and shock. This will be included in your test for the 4th. Okay. With regard to the test, I'm going to underline now for you. With regard to the test, it will be approximately 60 marks, approximately 70 minutes on the cardiovascular system, start to finish. Please remember your heart failure that we've discussed in class. It's also included for the test. And read your questions carefully. Okay, make sure that you understand the question that I'm asking and that you are answering the question that I'm asking. Okay, and always write the things that you think is most relevant first, than writing it here at the bottom. Okay. So yeah, good luck with the test. There's nothing to worry about. You just need to study your work and everything will be straightforward. Okay, so if we go to the textbook, I'm on page 562, congenital heart defects. Okay, it's everything for that paragraph. Just before types of congenital heart defects. Okay, so where it starts in capital letters, that whole section, up until the types of congenital heart defects. Then the different types of congenital heart defects, the ASD, VSD, PDA, transposition of the great vessels, the coarctation and the tetralogy of Fallot is everything. Clinical manifestations and diagnostic tools is everything. Then on page 565, shock is everything up until the end of complications. Okay, and that then, as I said, complete the cardiovascular system. Unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity today to write our class test, but we will work that in. If the classes resume on Thursday, I will do it on Thursday. It will be a nice type of revision for you as well for the coming test next week. If we don't have class on Thursday, then I will repeat the same procedure and we will continue with the respiratory system. Okay, so have a nice day. Enjoy. Sit behind your book studying. You've got ample time now. And I'll see you when I see you. Okay, bye-bye.